I'm Kathy Fox Alfano. Welcome to Upper Cape Spotlight, Conversations with Kathy. Today my guest is Eddie Doherty. Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks very much for having me on.
Of course. Now, Eddie is a well-known character here in Bourne and on the Upper Cape as being East End Eddie, with his fishing reports and commentary on what's going on here on the Cape. Eddie is a retired district court clerk magistrate, and he's also an author. This is his second book that he's going to talk about today, called Laughs, Lies, and American Justice. Now, first of all, why do people call you East End Eddie?
Well, Kathy, I used to fish the east end of the Cape Cod Canal almost exclusively, and so some of the other guys started calling me East End Eddie, and I took that for a pen name when writing for magazines, newspapers, and my first book. Okay. It also was like a nickname too, but I use it as a pen name.
Okay, it works. Yeah. And what does a district court clerk magistrate actually do?
Well, we basically run the clerk magistrate's office and provide personnel to run the court session as session clerks. A clerk magistrate's appointed by the governor. I was an assistant clerk magistrate in the Attleboro court for about 18 years, and then Governor Cellucci picked me to be the clerk magistrate of the Rentham District Court. And after being appointed to that position, I basically did the same job, except I was in charge. And so clerk magistrates do probable cause hearings, issue search warrants. For instance, in other 49 states, mostly judges do search warrants. And some of the things that we do, we issue arrest warrants. Sometimes the police can't arrest someone under certain circumstances, especially in a past misdemeanor, and so they come to us for a warrant. I would set bail on cases. We're on call with the police 24/7. We take turns doing that. And so I'd go to police stations, set bail, release prisoners. We also do small claims cases. When I first started in the system, only judges could hear small claims, but eventually a law was passed to allow clerk magistrates and assistants to do it. Judges weren't upset about that because there were a lot of complaints about small claims because both parties usually pro se without attorneys. And so we do that. We do show cause hearings. We do hearings on everything from speeding to murder.
Really?
And so, and so we keep busy in different facets of the whole courthouse.
Wow. Did you have to have training to do that?
Well, I was an assistant in Attleboro for 18 years, and I was a first assistant there. So actually, once I was appointed by Governor Cellucci, Chief Justice Zoll, who was the Chief Justice of the district courts at the time, told me that, he says, I usually send people for about a month of training in different courts. He said, but you've already done 18 years, so I'm just going to put you in that Dedham court for was less than a week, and that was fine.
Wow, I had no idea that it was that complicated, and that it went all the way up to murder. Wow.
Well, I mean, I usually wouldn't do a hearing on murder with the defendant there. Murder would be a simple hearing to determine if a warrant should issue, okay, or maybe a search warrant to find a weapon or something like that. No.
Now, I understand you've written for newspapers and magazines, and now this is your second book. What was the first one about?
The first one was about the Cape Cod Canal. It was called 7 Miles After Sundown. It was about surf casting for striped bass on the Cape Cod Canal. And, I finished, I retired in 2016. And 2017 were the two best years anybody could remember on the canal, so it was perfect timing for me catching fish. And I saw a lot of things there, a lot of interesting things, and so I decided just to memorialize them when I came home from fishing a little bit here and there, and lo and behold, it became a book. A famous guy from this area, John Doble, was a great photographer and retired detective and a great fisherman. He allowed me to use most of his photos for my book, so that was great. Came out nice.
Right. Yes, we know John well on the West End here.
On the West End, yeah, right, yeah.
Yes, so tell us about this latest book.
Well, Laughs, Lies, and American Justice is a compilation of short stories, many of them very short stories, miscellaneous, unrelated matters. I tried to remember funny things, Kathy, as time went on, and I wrote down a lot of things during those years. I should have written down more. but there's some serious stuff in there, but I wanted to try to remember the humor. Like before we started the trial, the court officer would give me the juror questionnaires. And the jurors are great. You know, they come to the court with no axe to grind. They have no constituency. And actually, I helped start the jury court in Attleboro, because before that, you had to go to Fall River to have a jury trial, which was inconvenient for everybody involved. But anyways, the court officer would give me the juror questionnaires. And I remember one of the questions was, list your highest level of education. So one guy put down 5 feet 8 inches. So, you know, he was the foreman too. So that was a tough day for justice. Then there was another juror who put down that he had an extensive background in law enforcement. So everybody figured he's probably a police officer, a federal agent. Well, it turned out he'd been arrested 17 times. So he did have an extensive background in law enforcement. Or then the time when somebody pleads guilty or admits to sufficient facts is what it's really called. It's like tantamount to pleading guilty. It's just a little bit different. But guy's about 55 years old and he's pleading guilty. And so the judge always has to make sure the defendant understands what's going on before he accepts the plea. And he or she accepts the plea. And so the judge has to ask questions, colloquy it's called, and make sure the guy understands everything. So, you know, one of the questions, the judge always wants to make sure, you know, how far the guy go in school. Did he graduate from college, high school, whatever it is. So he says to this guy, sir, how far did you go in school? The guy says, well, it was about 1.5 miles each way, Your Honor. So, you know, things like that you remember, you know.
Well, now, in this book, do you talk about Cape Cod?
I do, yeah, you know, and especially the Cape Cod Canal. But I've got people listed in the book. I actually made a list, Kathy, just because I wanted to
see if any of my friends are on this list.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's a good list, you know. So this book has great statesmen like retired DA Michael O'Keefe, Senator Paul Kirk Jr., Judge Don Carpenter, Attorney Kevin Callahan, who's a great lawyer in Falmouth. He's my cousin. He's a great guy. Yeah. Harold Skelton, who does so much for veterans. The late Phil Rollins, the great district attorney, George Regan from Regan Communications. And some of these people don't all live on the Cape, but they have summer homes here, or they work here. And then, of course, courthouse legends like Clerk Magistrate Ed Tague, Chuck Ardito, Liza Williamson, Don Hart, Roxana Vieira, Assistant Clerk Magistrates like Matt Quinn, Tom Hibbert, Bob Kelly, detectives like Brian Guiney, and also John Doble's son Brian is a police officer here. Attorney Bob Chamberlain, Attorney Drew Segadelli. There were iconic fishermen, like one group of guys calls themselves the Boys of Summer, like the famous baseball book. We got Tim Hollywood Petrarca, Paulie the Painter Gravina, Mashpee Mike Larea, Dancing Ben Flamino. Dancing Ben does a little dance to attract the business. And he did that dance and caught a 40-pound fish this year. So we're saying we should all learn how to do that dance. John the Chef Schmidt, Bill on the Grill Produce, and his lovely wife Tina, who actually are actors also. They did the Rip Van Winkle play this summer.
I know, I wrote it.
Oh, you did?
It.
Oh, good. Oh, so you know how good they are.
Oh, yes. Yeah. They're good friends of mine.
Oh, good. Yeah, I told Bill that, you know, I saw him in that outfit. He looked like Paul Revere. I said, if you walk down the canal like that, all the fish are going to jump out of the water. But and then there's businessmen like the businesses like the Fisherman's View, the Colbert family, Denny Bob and Bob's daughter Elizabeth. Dave Cronin, who owns the 19th Hole Tavern, he was partners with my late brother Chris. Skip Bandini of Fish Bandit Charters, Jason Colby of Little Sister Charters, George and Chris Carney, Wayne Hess, who owns Guppy Lures, George Morani, the family-run tackle shops like the Coots family at Red Top, the Millers, Canal Bait and Tackle, the Hopwoods and Makos, and of course the very famous Sue Barlow, who does such a great job filming me during the fishing season.
She's just awesome.
Yeah, and she edits it and makes me look good, so she's the best.
Excellent, excellent. So it sounds like you have plenty of Cape Cod residents.
Yeah, stories from all over, you know, and Cape Cod's beautiful.
Yes.
We live in Mattapoisett. It's almost Cape Cod, but we're very happy there. So, you never heard of it? That's good, because most people never heard of it.
Of course I've heard of it.
I'm just kidding.
Yes, no, it's lovely. Yeah. It's lovely, but it isn't Cape Cod.
Yeah, I know. So. But that's okay. We're happy.
All right. And so you have to commute over here just to do some fishing?
Well, most of the time I fish on this side of the canal.
Okay.
So I guess some people would argue that I'm already in the Cape because Wareham has the gate men in the Cape Cod League. Because I think that's because before there was a Cape Cod Canal, that was part of the Cape.
Okay.
And the canal, kind of separates things now.
I know.
And then, but we also have Pot of Sandwich on the mainland side of the canal as well, in Bourne.
So tell us what's actually in this book. I mean, it sounds like there's plenty of Cape Cod interest, but is there also about your work?
Yeah. There's a lot about the court system. There's some unhappy stories. I mean, there's nothing funny about some of the murder cases I worked on. With that issued search warrants on and things like that. One of the search warrants in the Aaron Hernandez murder case came out of my court, but I tried to remember mostly funny things. But one of the worst things I saw every day was battered women with black eyes, bloody lips, broken arms, all because some coward was in a bad mood. And so after seeing that for so long, Kathy, I decided that what I would do is take some of the proceeds from this book and donate it to Jane Doe Incorporated, which is a terrific women's domestic violence prevention. I say women. I mean, there are probably other victims that aren't women, but most of the victims I saw were women, and so I wanted to do that to try to make a small difference if I could, because every day I would try to help those women, but now that I'm retired, I wanted to do that. And I also wanted to honor my mother, who's still alive. She's going to be 96 in a couple of weeks, and my wife. Because my mother and my wife are just unbelievable. I went from the loving care of one to the loving care of the other, and they both accomplished incredible things on my behalf. So I dedicate a whole chapter to the two of them together, because they worked miracles to help me, and they just are really incredible, persevering people. So what was your question? What is my book like?
Yes, what's in the book?
Yeah, and so there's a lot of stories that I saw from police stations while I was there releasing prisoners or setting bail. One guy, he had written bad checks all over Massachusetts, and he was arrested for a couple of bad checks. And so this was at the Attleboro lockup, Attleboro Police Station. So I set $1,000 cash bail on him. He looked at me, he says, "Will you take a check?"
Check, right.
You saw that coming, huh? But it was true. No, it's true.
Oh, people.
And so it's a lot of different stories in there. There's also a lot of stories about my family, friends, politics, a lot of unrelated things, short stories, and I tried to remember what was interesting, what was funny,
Right. Now, you call your wife J. Doe?
I do, yeah.
And why would that be?
Well, it's not just me. Everybody calls her that now.
Okay.
Well, because her name is Joanne Doherty, and when Jennifer Lopez became known as J. Lo, one of Joanne's friends started calling her J. Doe, and it stuck. And now even her mother calls her J. Doe. So yeah, just even our kids call her that. So.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, but so that's pretty much become her name, J. Doe.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's go back to Mattapoisett. So did you always live there, or did you move there after you retired?
Well, no, we moved there after we retired, but and my wife retired from the Foxborough school system just a few months before I retired from the court system, and but we became familiar with Mattapoisett because my grandfather, Jack Flynn, was a detective with the Taunton Police. Great guy, well-known guy there. I used to walk down the street with him in Taunton. It was like he was the mayor. Everybody knew him, and so he had a summer home in Mattapoisett on Prospect Road, and it was kind of right where Prospect Road before it becomes Angelica Road. It's a big curve there, a lot of mailboxes in front of his house, and that was his summer home. But we were there every summer, all summer. So people thought it was our place, but it really wasn't. It was really his, and so that's how I became familiar with Mattapoisett. And then when we retired, Joanne loved Mattapoisett too, and so You know, a lot of times when a couple retires, the husband wants to go to Maine, the wife wants to go to Florida, and we got lucky that we both love Mattapoisett.
Yeah.
And so, so we bought a condo there in a couple of years before we retired, and it's kind of close to the Fairhaven line, and we love it.
Eddie, how do people buy your book?
Well, you can get it online, Kathy. You go online and you get it at Lulu Press, Lulu, and you click on bookstore, and then once this thing pops up, then you type in the name Laughs, Lies, and American Justice, and so that's where it is right now.
Have you tried to get it on Amazon?
It is on Amazon,
Oh,
and it's
okay.
also on Barnes and Noble.
Oh.
But it started on Lulu, so I tell people that, you know.
Right, got it,
But
got it. What else?
my first book's on Amazon too.
Oh, and what was the name of that?
7 Miles After Sundown.
Right, okay. And that's more about the fishing.
Yeah, I named it that because the canal is 7 miles long, and after sundown, because most of us start fishing in the dark. Most of the fish I've caught are at first light, actually, but we get there in the dark just to get a spot because it can be so crowded sometimes. So that's
see
why I
that.
called it 7 Miles After Sundown.
Ah, okay. Now, are there spots on the Cape on the canal that you would say you must fish here, or does it move around, or, you know,
Well,
what's your favorite places to go?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to say that publicly, so.
Oh, I see. Okay.
No, actually, you know, some guys are very sensitive about that, but that sensitivity really should be reserved for, you know, places in the ocean or a pond. The canal is a flowing 5-knot channel that's just moving all the time,
Right.
except at slack tide. And so, you know, it goes west for about 6 hours, then slack, then it goes east for about 6 hours. And so the fish, you know, go along in different places, and they do tend to favor certain spots a little more than others. But the bottom line is, you can catch a nice fish anywhere in the canal.
Right.
So, you know, it doesn't always matter.
Do you advocate catch and release, or do you take them home?
Well, no, I catch and release most of them. The definition of a keeper is very narrow range. So a lot of times you don't catch a keeper. You know, you catch a 30, 40-pound fish is not a keeper. You have to put that back. But I put a lot of keepers back anyways.
Why is a large fish not a keeper?
Well, because a lot of them are, the biggest fish are female, and they breed and they produce more fish.
Right.
And
Okay.
yeah, and yeah, so it was a great season on the canal this year, and we're looking forward to the same sighting in the spring.
So yeah, I was going to say, is about the time frame? Is it?
Well, you know, I used to catch a few keepers in. I refer to any big fish as a keeper, even though technically you can't keep it. But anyways, I'd catch some fish in April, but this year, the first 2 weeks of May were just phenomenal. There were fish riding the tides back and forth, and there's a lot of bait in the canal, and they stayed there for a couple of weeks, almost 2 weeks. And so that was kind of early. You know, usually you don't see it that good that early. So people think, well, maybe it's because of global warming, and you know, and that, who knows. The only good thing about global warming, from my perspective anyways, is the black sea bass, which is a delicious eating fish. And they have come, you know, they're much more plentiful the last year or so than ever before in this area.
So what else do you catch in the canal?
Bluefish, catch a lot of bluefish. They pretty much destroy your gear because they have teeth and they're vicious.
Ooh.
I saw one of them bite my Uncle Joe's finger off when I was a kid, so
Ooh.
I never forgot that.
Wow.
And you can catch black sea bass, scup, tautog, but most people there are fishing for striped bass and bluefish.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I
That's-
saw a whale there last year, so.
Yes,
you
I
don't-
heard about that.
You don't want to catch that, but
No.
you never know what you're going to see there.
Right, right. No, I've seen dolphin as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then the ocean's sunfish.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
The
yeah.
canal is always interesting. You know, now of course it's mostly ducks.
You think that's interesting? You used to see a sunfish jump out of the water. They're like 800 pounds and go flying. boom.
Really?
Yeah. One of my
Wow.
friends said the splash looked like somebody dropped a cow out of a helicopter. It was incredible, you know?
Wow.
Just a big fish.
I didn't know they could do that.
Yeah,
Wow, that's cool.
yeah.
Excellent. All right. If someone was going to start learning to fish on the canal, where would you suggest that they go?
I suggest they go to Red Top, one of the tackle shops that has a lot of equipment, a lot of knowledge. Also Mako's, and Canal Bait and Tackle. Those 3 shops have experienced people that can teach you different things and recommend the best equipment to start off with, you know. And they can put line on your reel and do whatever, show you the best lures. And
Wow.
but you know, the canal is kind of a special place in a
Yes.
way, because it can be dangerous. I mean, you've got this rip-rap stone bank that leads down to the water, and a lot of it's covered with sharp barnacles, slippery seaweed, and so you know, you have to be very careful. And when you get through all that, it's difficult to even find a safe place for your feet. Good footing is very important in the canal, and you're lucky if you find a flat spot for one foot and the other one is up in the air on a rock. So that's not for everybody. It's not like standing on the beach where you can move around, and then if you hook into a fish on the beach, after you reel them close in, you can kind of back up and guide the fish on the beach. It's not like that in the canal. You can't back up very much, and on most places I'm talking about. So you know, I just taught a guy how to fish this summer. He asked me to teach him, and he's a nice guy, but you know, it's not for everybody. You know, fishing is safer on a beach. So.
Right, and you're not getting into the water.
Yeah, well, I get in the water. I have 12-inch boots that I wear.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 16-inch boots, and they come right below my knee. And so I fish in about 12 inches of water sometimes. It depends on where the tide is and other things, but I don't go out deep. Some guys wear waders, and I always thought that might be a little dangerous in the canal. If you fell in the canal with waders on, they filled up with water in a 5-knot current, you could have a problem. So I have just as much fun with my boots, and I don't go deeper than that. But I do go in the water sometimes, depending on different parts of the landscape.
So where, I should say, you're called East End Eddie, but there's a lot of fishing going on in the West End. Do you ever come down that way, or are you staying?
No, I actually do. Actually, it's funny you asked me that, Kathy. On the front cover of my first book is a picture of me holding a fish, and in the background is a railroad bridge, which is, of course, is the West End. You won't believe how many guys have busted my chops about that one.
That's not.
Or sometimes, even I'll be fishing in the West End, and somebody will ride by on a bike and go, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." You know, I mean, it's just a name, guys, but you know, some guys take that more serious than others. But yeah, I fish in the West End. One of the best places to fish, actually to catch fish, is a place I dubbed the Combat Zone. It's right next to the railroad bridge on the mainland side, on a west tide, because your line will be taken right over to a hole right near the railroad bridge. The only problem is 50 guys know about that, and so you know they'll stand there and there's tangled lines, and sometimes I'll be fishing in Aptuxet on the other side of the canal, and I'll hear guys screaming that far, "Open your bail!" You know, they're all tangled lines, and you know.
Okay.
Actually, if you fish in sequence when you're there, you have to fish in sequence or you'll get
What does that
lost.
mean?
Well, you're lined up. There's 50 guys lined up, and so the guy closest to the railroad bridge is number 1. He's going to cast first, and then his line's immediately going to be taken to west tide to the right. And then number 2, number 3, and when it gets all the way down to the last guy, number 30 or 50 or whoever he is, he will yell, "Okay, number 1, you ready to go again?" So one day we had a guy come. I was number 1, and then this other guy comes who's very inexperienced, and he gets on my right. So he becomes number 1. So I'm trying to explain it to him, but this broken English and it's hard. So I told him, I said, "You're number 1." But he thought that was a designation of, you know, experience, like you're number 1, you know? And, you know, he thought it was a compliment. And so he keeps telling me, he's trying to be humble, he's telling me I'm number 1. So anyways, I finally got it down and he cast. But then, you know, it's funny, like 15 minutes later, his wife shows up. And he suddenly lost his humility. He says, "They make me number 1."
That's funny. How much time do you think you spend fishing on an average day in the summer?
Well, I'm there pretty much almost every day. You know, unless somebody dies, you got to go to a funeral. But on average, I'm there from. I am there from like I get up about 3 in the morning, and then I probably fish till about 9. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you go back to bed?
Yeah, I go back. I go back to bed pretty soon after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. 3 in the morning. You must see some interesting things then.
Oh yeah. There's some stuff going on. Actually, my youngest granddaughter just gave up her nap, And that was like a big thing. She used to say, Grampy and I take a nap, you know, but now Grampy's still taking a nap and she isn't. Yeah, you see, you know, it's funny, you start fishing next to someone, you think you know the guy next to you, but it's in the dock. You start talking to him and you realize when the sun comes up, that's not Larry, who the heck is that guy, you know?
That is funny. Wow. So is there anything else you could tell us about your latest laugh, lies, and American justice?
I can tell you a couple of quick stories. I was doing a hearing one time with a husband and wife who had all kinds of problems, no violence, but they, thank God, but unimaginable problems. And you know, a lot of times I'd be dealing with issues that weren't criminal, but I was kind of like a marriage counselor sometimes. I didn't mind if I could help people, you know. So she said, this is back in the, I don't know if you remember, years ago, I'm sure you will, ESP was kind of a common extrasensory perception.
Yes.
Was kind of, that acronym was thrown around a lot. So this woman says to me, he doesn't take out the rubbish enough, you know, and tomorrow's rubbish day. He's not going to take out the rubbish tomorrow. So now this guy is incensed. The husband's mad because, in effect, his wife is predicting the future. She's saying he's not going to take out the rubbish tomorrow. So he says to me, what does she have? He wants to say, what does she have, ESP? But he says, what does she have, ESPN? I'll tell you one other quick story in 1 minute. In the Attleboro court, we had this thing that you used to seal envelopes with. It was rolled through water, and anyways, we called it the liquor. Everybody called it the liquor. It licked the envelopes. So the liquor might be on anybody's desk, depending on who was the last to use it. So one day in the morning, there's a long line outside the clerk magistrate's office, and this one woman in the office wanted to know where the liquor was. So she loudly announced, "Who's got the liquor?" Well, this guy in the line, this disgruntled criminal defendant, says, "No wonder this line's so long. They're all in there drinking." So try to remember things like that, Kathy.
Yeah. So it sounds like this is a really fun book, Laugh, Lies, the American Justice. If you want to laugh, learn about fishing, learn about our justice system, pick it up at lulu.com.
LuluPress.com.
LuluPress.com.
If you just remember Lulu, L-U-L-U, it'll get you there.
Great. Thank you so much, Eddie. That's really entertaining, and I hope you get the book.
Well, thanks very much, Kathy.
All right.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care now.